Welcome to the Canes Corner podcast. I am Adam Gold, a post-draft edition of the Canes Corner podcast and a pre-free agency edition of said podcast. That was Michael Buffer, apparently a Flyers fan. And since you're in Vegas, you do Vegas things like Celine Dion announcing the Montreal Canadiens pick. Wild stuff. On TV, the things at the Sphere looked absolutely awesome. Almost want to hold it there every single year. And I know the NHL is going to do a bunch of things that maybe people don't like about the draft, like keep everybody home. I don't know. We don't have to get into that now. We're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. If it's for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina on Hamlin Road in Durham. No place like it. Sammy Hanner's crew do a great job. And check them out online, aluminumcompany.com. All right, Mark Seidel, North American Central Scouting. He's going to join us. He's an amateur scout. He knows a little bit certainly more than I do, which that's a low bar, about the players Carolina drafted. We'll get his take on some of them. Maybe also ask him about the Bradley Nadeaus of the world, Jackson Blakes, maybe Scott Morrow. Because you got to figure that some of these guys are definitely candidates to make the Hurricanes this upcoming year. But before we get to that, and he's going to join us probably in about 10 minutes. Before we get to that, let's go through what happened or what didn't happen. And I know I put out a short, like a 6-minute Friday night late podcast. I meant to do one yesterday, but I figured I knew I was going to do this today. So I figured I would just throw some thoughts out on social media, which I did yesterday. At AGoldFan, you can always reach me. And we're going to try and get to some questions here. But I put out a short on Friday night after the draft. And these are my thoughts, a couple of days removed from the Friday night first round, what happened Saturday with the remaining 6 rounds. Those are the rounds that Carolina was involved in. And what is likely to happen starting tomorrow, what's already happened today. So let's start with Jake Guentzel, shall we? And what happened? So Guentzel's camp their ask from Carolina was 8 years, $8 million a season. As of Thursday night, the Hurricanes informed Guentzel's agent that Carolina would be meeting that, to the point where Tom Dundon and company, the organization, made it known around the league that they were going to keep Guentzel. And at that point, Carolina was about to embark on the trading of Martin Necas. Said this before, that you weren't going to sign Guentzel and sign Necas. I know Eric Tulsky said, the new general manager, that they would do both. They could, well, not they would, but that they could do both. And honestly, they do have room to do both, but I never thought for a second that they would do both. Carolina doesn't have $40 million in cap room. They got about 25, so roughly, maybe a little less. So Guentzel at 8, and Necas at, let's just say, 7. They certainly could fit both. But let's remember, Seth Jarvis is getting paid this year. And you've already increased Jalen Chatfield's salary by, more than $2 million. And if you bring back Steph Nason and Jordan Martinook, those are going to be raises as well. So it wasn't like the Hurricanes had a ton of money to throw around. So it was either going to be Guentzel, or it was going to be Necas, or quite possibly neither. But I thought it was going to be one or the other. And then on Thursday, because I always thought that Guentzel was going to free agency. And I always thought if it got to free agency, and I will say this, every case that gets to free agency for Carolina, I think ultimately ends with the player leaving. So there are, Guentzel we know is leaving. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 additional cases going to free agency. And I think they're all going. Brady Skjei, Brett Pesce, Teuvo Teravainen, Jordan Martinook, Steph Nason, Tony DeAngelo. I think they're all leaving. And primarily that's because Carolina is not going to get in a bidding war for any player, no matter who it is. They're just not going to do a bidding war. And all of these cases have become bidding wars. So Carolina is not going to engage. This is the way we value you. And we're willing to go to that. And if we get into a market where it's now highest bidder, well, this is our value. If you want to go somewhere else, Tom Dundon is go. That's fine. Go. By the way, I'm not endorsing any of this as good. I'm just saying this is the way they are. And so in the case of, let's just say, Brady Skjei, when it gets to Monday at noon, and frankly, we're already there, but when it gets to Monday at noon and the bids come in, I'm sure they'd love to keep Brady Skjei. Here's what we are willing to go to. When we get to the next part, this is what we are not going to do. We are not going to have a bidding war. Carolina will not engage in that. This is our offer. If you like it, let's go. If not, we loved you when you were here. So now let me just drill back a little bit into the Guentzel. Because here's the way I think this happened. What happened is that it took a while for Carolina to get to 8 times 8. By the way, when I do 8 times 8, the first number will always be the years. The second number will always be the millions of dollars. So it took Carolina a while. Remember the week leading up, the 4 or 5 days leading up to Thursday night, or when the report came out that Carolina was meeting the offer, meeting the ask. Remember, Carolina was at 7.5. They were talking about this as a $60 million deal over 8 years. And that works out to $7.5 million. So Carolina wanted this to be under 8. They wanted the contract to be, now if 60 over 8 is the truth, and I think it is, well, they wanted that to be below Andre. Andre's at 7.75. And so it dragged on until Thursday or until Friday. We thought maybe Friday. I can't tell you how many times I refreshed Twitter on Friday, and all the hockey insiders that I follow who are more plugged into the contract stuff than I'm ever going to be. And there was no movement. And I thought that as soon as we got to the draft, I thought it was trouble. Because let's be honest, Friday night to Monday ain't that far. And what I've known about covering this team and professional sports is that, yeah, technically you're not allowed to talk, but everybody talks. So the market really opened, I guess, on Thursday. We know where players are going. So this is a criticism, what I'm about to say. Tom Dundon's negotiating style. We saw it with Sebastian Aho twice. First time resulted in the offer sheet. We saw it in the head coach, Rod Brindamore. Really, twice. His style is, I'm going to get to here, and I'm going to make you come the last yard. So this is the way I term it. they call timeout a lot on the way into the end zone. And that's what I think happened here. I think Tom thought he could get it for less than 8. They let it hang out there, thinking that Jake, who wanted to be here, by the way, for the people who said, I don't think he ever wanted to be here. No, he did. But we get to Thursday, and all of a sudden now Carolina is going to match or meet it. And at that point, the market's open. At that point, Tampa knows what they're going to do. Tampa knows that they're going to get rid of Mikhail Sergachev and get rid of other contracts. They know they're going to create cap room. They know they're not going to offer Steven Stamkos big money over many years. And they know that other than Sam Reinhart, the other big-time goal scorer in the free agent pool is none other than Jake Guentzel. And that's the guy they want. So once Guentzel got word that Tampa's interested, seriously interested, to the point where I bet the number ends up being 7 times 9.5, which in the grand scheme of things, totally isn't very much higher than what Carolina's offering. If you think about the total number, 8 times 8 is 64. 7 times 9.5 is 63 plus 3.5, 86.5. Ain't that big a difference, right? Yes, one fewer year, but there's not going to be another contract after that. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it'll be somewhat miraculous if Guentzel even finishes as an effective player the 7 years in Tampa. But higher average annual value, the agents and the other players like that, and no state tax in Florida. That is a different and a separate issue to deal with, because the fact that Florida doesn't have a state income tax makes a difference. I'm not smart enough to tell you exactly how much of a difference it is, but it's a difference when you don't have to pay state income tax. North Carolina doesn't have high income taxes, high state taxes, but everything's higher than 0. So the 9.5 that he'll likely get over 7 is significantly higher than what Carolina's offering because there's no state income tax. NHL at some point is going to have to deal with that. I mean, it may not be a major difference, like a huge difference, but it's a difference. It allows Florida teams to either pay a little bit less or makes it easier to discern between two offers that seem pretty similar. One a little bit higher, but it's actually a lot higher. So that's, I think, how it happened. I think if the Hurricanes had met the offer, let's just say Monday, I think Guentzel signs the 8 times 8. And he's a Carolina Hurricane. And then maybe they trade Necas to the Columbus Blue Jackets and draft that massive center who went 4th overall. Instead, get something else other than the draft pick, a draft pick and a player. Maybe a halfway decent forward or a defenseman. So the Guentzel miss and the Guentzel negotiation that went sideways really was a bit of an issue. No, not a bit of an issue. It was an issue. And this is what I'm gathering through everything I have been able to read and thinking about how Carolina typically negotiates. I understand trying to get players to take a little less to stay. You want to keep as many good players as possible. But it really wasn't. That wasn't the way it was going to work out when you tried to get him to take. Because honestly, 8 times 8 as an average annual number is lower than Jake Guentzel is worth. You'll see what the number is when Tampa announces the contract tomorrow at 12 o'clock and 2 seconds. It might be the first thing that pops up on your screen if you are a refresher of all of that. All right, a lot of other things to talk about, and we're going to get to them. But first, I want to bring in Mark Seidel, North American Central Scouting, and we'll get his take on a couple of players the Hurricanes took in the draft when they got around to it. And who knows, maybe a couple of their prospects that might be part of the team this year. So that is Mark Seidel. How are you, sir?
Good. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing very well. Let's kind of dig into at least a couple of the guys they took. I appreciate your time. By the way, at Mark Seidel on Twitter, he makes it easy. So the Hurricanes, I joked with you before. I set the over-under at 3.5 Russians. I didn't realize they would blow it out of the water. They took six Russian players. They drafted 10, 6 Russians, 2 Swedes, a Czech, and we're going to get to him first, a Czech who plays in the Swedish league, and 1 North American. And we're gonna talk about him as well. So let's start with Dominik Badenka, who's a right shot defenseman. He's a Czech player, but he plays in the Swedish Elite League. And I think they're excited about him, and I've read enough about him that makes me think, I mean, he might be an NHL player down the road pretty soon. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's funny. You asked him about the Russians before. He said the over-under was 3.5. I took the under, and shows you how dumb I am. And they almost doubled it. So you were right. They do love the Russians. But Badenka, yeah, like I say, he's a Czech. He's a right shot D, big kid. Very solid all around. He doesn't really do anything that dazzles you. He's not going to quarterback their power play. He's probably a third pairing guy at worst, but he's probably a second pairing guy at best. Now, as you just watched Florida, win the Stanley Cup and the teams that went deep, you need those guys, and they're very important. Yeah. Moves very well, does a lot of things well, and you need those guys to be kind of your 4, 5, 6 defensemen in your roster, and that's what I think Badenka will end up being. But not a lot of risk with him. Has a lot of good points to his game, just not a superstar.
It almost sounds like you're describing a player that Carolina has and is about to lose in Brett Pesce, in that Pesce doesn't do a lot of things exceptionally well, except think the game. He thinks the game exceptionally well. But he was, a 3rd-round pick, I think, coming out of the University of New Hampshire, and I don't believe anybody thought he was going to be a star, and as he turned out for Carolina, he was. He was a great player, and unfortunately, I think he's going to go to the Devils. We'll talk about that later with everybody else. But you know what? Some of those guys can develop into something more than anybody expects. Talk to me.
Sorry, this time of year, everybody wants to look for guys that are quarterback to power play, high on offensive guys, flashy guys. But I mean, you win. You just watch Florida win, and you win with those kind of guys with Badenka. And again, with Carolina's history of drafting, and a guy that, like I said, is a piece to a winning team. He's not the piece. He's not the winning piece, but he's certainly a piece, and I think he's a good pick.
All right, let's see. And I said this on Friday night. I came on and did a very quick kind of a first round recap. And what Carolina does, so he was drafted 34th overall, which is the 2nd pick in the 2nd round. Carolina traded number 27 because they don't see any difference at all between the 27th and 34th pick. In their mind, it's the same. They're going to get the same type of player. Obviously, it might be a different player, but the same type of player with the same chance of making an NHL roster down the road. So they'd rather have an extra kick at the can, and the kick at the can came at number 50. And this is Nikita Artemonov. I don't know. Yeah. He's a Russian kid. He's a right wing. He's under 6 foot. Shocking that they would take a winger who is under 6 foot. What can you tell me about Russian number 1 in this draft?
Well, just on the back point, they probably were taking Badenka at that first spot, and trade down so they get this kid for free. Really, is exactly
Right.
what happened. So this was a guy obviously they liked a lot. So Badinka, and they end up getting this kid. This kid's a guy we really like. Certainly, we had him higher. We had him ranked 46th. He went 50th. Played in the KHL, and for guys that are in their draft, you're playing in the KHL. It's there's guys that do it, but there's not guys that have a lot of success, and he certainly did. I mean, he was half a point a game in the KHL, which obviously is a very good league. Like you said, he's under 6, strong kid though. Showed this year to play against men. So did a lot of good things. The best part about his game, quite frankly, for me, is that I think he can play. He's got enough skill and ability to play maybe in that top 6. But if not, he can play in the bottom 6. He plays hard. He's strong. He's got high IQ. He's good away from the puck. So he's got a lot of tangibles to his game that if he isn't a scoring guy, which I'm not sure he is, he can play. Like, too many guys in the draft are either they have to play in the top 6, they can't play in the NHL. This kid, can play on your second line, but he can also play on your third, fourth line. And I think, ultimately end up being that second or third line guy for them. But I thought it was a good pick for them.
Yeah, I think Mark Seidel from North American Central Scouting. It's an independent scouting bureau. Like here's the thing I read about him, and I'm trying to remember where it was. I think he was second among 18-year-olds in the KHL in points per game. Yeah. I think so. When you're playing as an underage player in a pro league, and is the KHL the second best pro league in the world? Is the Swedish league, the Finnish league? Certainly it's not that big a difference, I guess, between the Swedish league, the Finnish league, and the KHL. So that has to be pretty good, no?
100%. The KHL, I think, is the best league outside the NHL. There's a lot of former NHLers there, a lot of high-end Russian players playing in that league, a lot of imports. So, yeah, I think it's very impressive. Now, he played with the Silyev kid, the phenom, the big defenseman that Jersey took. So there were lots of eyes on them this year. And certainly, I was a guy that loved Silyev. But every time you watch this kid play, the best thing I can say about it is he didn't look like a 17, 18-year-old kid out there playing. And that's the best thing you can say about a kid that's in his draft. You're playing against, former NHL defensemen. So, again, I thought it was a really good pick, and mostly because he's got some adaptability. He can be in your second or third line, and that's hard to find in this year's draft.
All right, let me move on to the one North American that the Hurricanes took of the 10 picks. And I don't know if I'm going to say his name right. Justin Poirier. He's a little guy, 5'7", but he's got a sturdy build. He looks like he's we'll just say a low center of gravity.
Yes.
But he is one of just 2 players under or 17 years old to ever score 50 goals in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, the other being Sidney Crosby.
Yeah,
that seems good.
Yeah, the Crosby kid plays for Pittsburgh. I'm sure you've heard of him.
I've heard of him, yes.
He's had a good career. You know what, stop me if you heard this before, and if you keep going through the draft, you'll see guys that are small forwards again, and that's Carolina's motif. But listen, as I always tell people, this kid, scoring goals is relatively important. As you know, Adam, I'm not very smart, but I do know if you score more goals than the other team, you win the game.
Yes.
And this kid is a goal scorer. One of the things I've sort of in some ways equated him to Cole Caulfield. Everybody, Cole Caulfield certainly had a lot more, publicity and pizzazz about him. But this kid scores goals the way Cole Caulfield does. Like you said, he scored 51 in Quebec this year. He led the Quebec League in scoring in the playoffs. 17 games, almost 2 points a game.
Right.
So he's a pure goal scorer at that size. Now, does he have some warts to his game? Sure. Is he bad away from the puck, and does he cheat? Sure. But listen, you're getting him where you got him, and you're getting a guy that can score goals. And I think it's, again, it's another case of Carolina. And we talk, almost every year we talk, and they get good value. And this is a kid that has a chance. When you're picking up that part of the draft, if you're getting a guy that, has a chance to be a goal scorer in the NHL, you're doing pretty well. Size is an issue, sure, and all the other things that are wrong with it. But when you're talking about a guy like this that scored 50, and like you say, he's in the company of Crosby, it's a very, very good value pick. And if he doesn't turn out, okay, but if he does, certainly it's a home run.
And this is really the method to Carolina's madness of what they do in the draft is they trade back all day long because they feel like you just never know. These are all lottery tickets to them, which is why they're not so concerned with the size. They're looking more at a certain skill set that they're looking for, and goal scoring is certainly one of them. Before I ask you about a couple of players that we actually saw at the very end of this season, is there anybody else in Carolina's? They took a bunch of big defensemen, like sometimes tall and lanky, but for the most part big. They didn't take a goalie among all their picks. Is there any of those picks that jumped out at you as saying there's something about them that you really like that might be able to make a mark?
Well, 6 of the 10 picks that Carolina took we had them higher rated than where they took them. I mean, a couple of them were, we had them 100 spots above where they took them. The Avramov kid, again, another Russian kid that we really like. I think he's got a chance that they took. These Russians, it's kind of a weird world we're living in because they don't play internationally for the most part. It's hard to get live viewings except for the Russian guys that are over there. So, but I think Carolina went in there and said, listen, we've got a chance to get some guys here, some high end skill guys. And so, like I said, as far as when we do the grading, we haven't done the grades yet of the draft. I just got back from Vegas today. But they'll grade very high. When you've got 6 of the 10 that they picked lower than where we had them rated, it's a good draft for them. So I think, Poirier is a guy that I just excited about because it won't shock me if down the road in 5 or 6 years, the way we talk about Braden Point in Tampa at one point of, geez, how did he fall and became such an impactful guy? Now, I'm not saying he's Braden Point, but, Braden Point was the same thing. Not the quickest guy in the world, but could put up points and could score. And that's kind of what this kid has. So, Carolina kills it every year to draft it, not because I'm on the podcast, but they really do. And that's why they're always successful. And they, like you said, they look for a skill set and they've got a bunch of guys here, a bunch of lottery tickets, and we'll see if some of them turn out. And, I would say better chance than not compared to some of the other teams in the league.
I'm not great at the scratch off game, by the way. All right. Let me just ask you about 3 players that we saw at the end of the year. And I know, your expertise, Mark, is the amateur side of this, but I know you follow these guys as they move through. So talk to me about Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake, and Scott Morrow. They all had a cameo at the end of the year. I would say kind of mixed results for me watching. Nadeau obviously has a great shot. Jackson Blake might be a little bit more of a well-rounded player, and Scott Morrow's also got a ton of upside. But what do you know about these guys?
Well, I think let's start with Nadeau. I mean, he's sort of the higher touted of all 3 of those guys. They was unbelievable in college. Had a great year, certainly. We had him at 46 when they took him. They took him at 30.
Right.
I wasn't sure it could translate his skill out of the BCHL and his ability to score what he did out there. I was wrong, quite frankly. And you're right. When he came up this year, he kind of showed that he still has some warts. He's still a kid. He's playing against men and stuff. So I expect some of that's going to have to, that'll develop as he gets stronger. But, I think he's a guy, we talk about small, undersized offensive guys, and there's another one. But he showed that, playing with his brother at Maine, he really had a great year, and I think is ready to jump in. Jackson Blake is a guy, you hit it on the head, more well-rounded, certainly not the offensive force. Now he has scored more in his college career than I ever thought he would, quite frankly. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought he
top
was
3 for Hobie Baker, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, has gotten way better. Had the bloodlines. Obviously, his dad played in the NHL and stuff. But, I don't think he's going to be a scorer at the NHL level despite his college numbers. But again, is probably a middle pair or a middle 6 forward that's going to play somewhere on that team at some point in time, just because of his hockey IQ and the other assets he's got. And then finally, the Morrow kid, he came in and, it's a big jump. I know they play, guys want to talk about the NCAA, and you're playing against 23, 24-year-olds. It's hard for defensemen to come in. He had an excellent career at UMass. He really did. I think Carolina has proven they'll take things slow. I wouldn't be shocked if he spends some time and some quality time in the American Hockey League here, kind of get his game tuned up a little bit. They've certainly got some depth, and we'll see what they do with free agency here. But, I think they've got a lot of opportunity. But this, those are all 3 guys that they've taken that, as you said, are lottery tickets. But right now, they've got the first 5 numbers of the 7-number lottery with these guys that probably have a chance to play on the roster. So, we see how important it is to have these young guys with relatively inexpensive contracts. And all 3 of these guys are probably a year or 2 away from being regular contributors, but I think they will be part of that team.
Yeah, I think we're going to go to training camp, and I think all 3 kids are going to get a chance to make the roster, but it does depend on what they do in free agency and the guys they bring in to try to fill it out. Right now, I know this. there's a lot of room at the inn. there,
Yes.
there are spots available.
Yeah.
That is
But
Mark Seidel.
you know what, Adam? Sorry, my last point is, and I said this before. I think I've even said it on your show. No player has ever been hurt by playing in the American Hockey League. Like no career has ever suffered from playing there. You know, you get in there, you get with men, you learn how to be a pro, and all three guys will benefit from that. And Carolina's showing patience. So, you know, I think fans should be excited. We'll see what they do with free agency, but it could be a very different looking team, as you say, come October.
There is, yeah, I hope it doesn't take that long. Yeah, and as an added bonus, Carolina has an AHL affiliate this year, back with the Chicago Wolves. That is Mark Seidel, North American Central Scouting. I appreciate your time as always, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Excellent. Happy to be on. Enjoy your show. Keep the great work, and hopefully Carolina puts it together this year and wins it. So anything you need, I'm always here for you, buddy. Take care.
Happy Canada Day.
Thank you. Happy July 4th to you.
Thank you very much. That is Mark Seidel, North American Central Scouting. All right. I'll tell you what, let's what we have with some of the questions here. I'll go through some of these, and then I'll kind of run down some of the free agents and why Carolina is not going to sign really any of them. Mikhailov, shouts down under. Adelaide, represent. I need someone to make sense in why we just gave Jake away for nothing. I guess you're talking about the 3rd round pick. I mean, you were going to lose him for nothing. You got a 3rd round pick. I think that's something. I actually think that's good business to take Tampa's 3rd round pick next year. Dirty little secret. I'm not bullish on Tampa next year. I understand. I'm not saying that Carolina's going to be great, but I'm not necessarily so bullish on Tampa. They've got a lot of work to do. Mikhail Sergachev, that ain't a small loss. It just isn't. Tenors, wasn't great for them. Anyway, I mean, I think Tampa will be good, but I think their wild card range, no. Well, maybe they're better than Boston. Boston's got a lot of retooling to do as well. Samuel, what's the verdict on Necas? Oh, I was going to get to that at the end. Might as well get to it now. There is no verdict on Martin Necas. Not yet. I've read on Twitter, which is bad. I've read a lot of people tell me how Necas doesn't want to play here, and they should get rid of him. And what I'm telling you is that I think a lot of that is overblown. I think Necas wants to feel wanted. I think the front office really likes him. I think the head coach really likes him. He is at times a bit frustrating, but what I don't understand are, like, the evidence is in time on ice. And Martin Necas, yeah, he was not on the top power play unit for a lot of the year. He gets no shorthanded time. He was 3rd in ice time among forwards this year. So how do we equate, like, the head coach not liking him with him putting him on the ice all the time? So Marty fades in and out of defensive responsibilities. And I think if the Hurricanes could move Necas and get better, they will. But keep this in mind. There aren't a lot of Marty Necases available in a trade for Marty Necas. Like, the chances of you bringing a better player back in a Necas deal, I just don't think that exists. Keep an eye on Winnipeg. Winnipeg has a young player, I don't know who he is, that they've decided they have to move. And Nick Ehlers, who is a very good player, albeit kind of mercurial, sort of like Marty, that might be available as well, but we're dealing with somebody who's a year away from unrestricted free agency. So I don't know how that's going to work out. I know Ehlers is a dynamite player when he's right. But again, moving Necas, hard to get a better player back. And I think the front office does like him. And I think he's got friends on this team. I just think that Marty wants more responsibility. He craves more responsibility. Can he play to the point where he's going to get it? Yes, he wants to be a center. I mean, he's not one. Everybody played center as a kid. Everybody. Seth Jarvis is a center. He ain't playing center. Like, it is a different animal. It took Sebastian Aho 2 years and a lot of proof before the head coach went, yeah, okay, you're a center. And now Sebastian is one of the better two-way centers in the league. So I wouldn't write off Necas at all. I still think that there's a contract to be signed. I don't think it'll be long-term. I think it'll be 2 years. I think it'll get him to free agency, and then he's free to go where he wants. But I do think that the Hurricanes are way more likely to keep Martin Necas than they are to let him go. And I'm okay with that. I said this before the draft. I said it. I said the Hurricanes are more likely to keep Necas than not. And I really didn't think they had a chance at Guentzel. As it turned out, they had a real chance at Guentzel. All right. Ron says what stinks, if the rumor is correct, is that Guentzel is getting 7 times 9.25, which is basically 8 times 8. Yeah, slightly more, right? Just a hair more. But as I said, remember that in the state of Florida, there's no state tax. So it's bigger than that to Necas. Okay. And like, I had somebody say that it was going to be over 10. I don't think it's going to be over 10. I don't know what the number is. I didn't see any number available. Jack, in your opinion, would the Canes have signed Guentzel if they were more proactive in offering 8 times 8? I said that earlier. Yes, I think if they had done that on Monday, that's a done deal. And then you can go to the draft knowing that, hey, there's a lot of interest in Marty Necas. How high a draft pick can we get? That's what I think. And I kind of pieced that together from everything that I was able to glean. All right, rather than go through a ton more questions, maybe we can get to a few others before we get out of here. We are approaching. Gosh, we're already approaching the 40-minute mark. I don't want to go too much longer. I appreciate everybody's time jumping online here, especially to all of you wherever you are down under. I think Brady Skjei is going to end up in Nashville. I think Carolina does want to retain him, but at what price? 7 times 7.5, 7 times 7. I don't know what Brady's going to get. It's hard. It's really hard to gauge these numbers. But I think that when you couple all the offense, the fact that he can play so many minutes, he can play in every situation. He's getting better. He's a very good athlete. I think he'll age gracefully. Not to mention, I mean, prematurely gray, but dashingly handsome. That says 7 times 7.5, 7 times 7. And I just don't know that that's in Carolina's budget when you consider Slavin's getting an extension, which will kick in after next year. Alexander Nikishin is their, stud of the future on the blue line. He's also a left shot. So do you do Slavin, Nikishin, and Skjei all on the left side? Now, Nikishin played a lot on his offside in Russia, but I know 2 things. 1, the KHL is not the NHL, and 2, the head coach doesn't really like playing guys on his offside. It is, for him, a last resort. So, I don't know. But if they sign Brady Skjei, I am not going to go, man, that was a bad idea. I'd love to keep Brady Skjei. I just don't think it's going to happen. Brett Pesce is going to end up with the New Jersey Devils. Don't know what the deal is going to look like, but I'm guessing 6 times 5.5. I don't think he's going to go over 6 because he doesn't add to your offense. And I love Brett Pesce, the player. I love him. I love the person. I don't think he's going to age well. I just don't. It's going to suck to play against him. And I hope he gets everything out of his career. I do. I love the guy. But I just don't think his body's going to hold up. I really don't. Teuvo Teravainen. I had convinced myself that there was a chance they could keep Turbo on like a 3 times 5.5 deal. But conversations I have had around the team are unconvinced that Turbo, kind of like Pesce, will age well. I think they scored 25 goals this year. He had over 20. I thought his year was okay. I didn't think it was great. He had a bunch of goals early in the season, and then kind of leveled off. What I do think is that Teravainen is another one of those players that is an all-situation player, kind of like losing Vincent Trocheck, in that he plays power play, penalty kill, smart, super smart player. I would love to keep Teravainen, but the fact remains he's not a workout warrior. I don't know that his body's going to age well either. And the Hurricanes are very much about what is the contract going to look like in the back half of it. And I think they're terrified of that. I understand that, but I wished that they could keep him, but I don't think they're going to. Now we're going to get to the part of this conversation that I really don't like. I thought after Jalen Chatfield signed, I thought the number one priority for their front office should have been Jordan Martinook. But here's my intel. Martinook knows that there is a bigger contract out there for him. He went from, I think it was 3 times 2 to 3 times 1.8. He took a pay cut to stay here 3 years ago. And I think Jordan Martinook, who's now got 2 kids and is already 30 and plays a I don't give a damn about my body type of game. I think Jordan Martinook is looking at this as this is the last contract I'm going to sign. So because of that, I think Jordan wants to go into free agency and see what the market will bear. So 2 things I will point out. I've pointed them out before. The Pittsburgh Penguins gave Brock McGinn a 4-year, $2.7 million annual contract. I think Martinook is a better player now than Brock McGinn was then. I think he plays with a higher rate of speed. I think he's got a little bit more goal-scoring ability. I think he's got more leadership. On top of that, Barclay Goodrow signed a 6-year deal with the Rangers after the Lightning won their second straight Stanley Cup. He was part of it. 3.7 a year. Now, the Rangers just waived him, but not because he wasn't a good player. You watched the playoffs, right? The Rangers waived him. San Jose claimed him. So San Jose, with I think 3 years left on that deal, or 4 years left in that deal, were like, yeah, we'll take him back because that's where he came from originally. He went from San Jose to Tampa, then to the Rangers. I think Martinook's going to find a 4 times 3 out there And Carolina wasn't going to match that in terms of contract length or dollars. And here's a guy that I think is part of the culture of the Hurricanes. So that's going to be a sad one. Steph Nason, I think they can bring him back, but I think they've got a value. Here's what you have to remember about the Hurricanes. This is in many ways why they come up short. They're a multiple time silver medalist, no? Whether it's Matthew Tkachuk or Timo Meier, Elias Pettersson, although I don't really think, or Elias, I don't really think that was a real thing. I think that was them being nice to Jim Rutherford in Vancouver for allowing him to use the Hurricanes as a bargaining chip to get Pettersson signed, but whatever. Maybe I'm wrong. And they're going to be silver medalists with Jake Guentzel too. So the Hurricanes will not get into a bidding war. This is part of the reason they don't do free agency. Remember last year, they kind of blew everybody's minds with the Dmitry Orlov signing. As good as he was at the end of the year, he's not a $7.75 million defenseman. They just figured, let's just offer him this for 2 years. It'll get us to the next guy. It'll get them to Nikishin and go from there. Turns out, Orlov was very good, certainly the second half of the year and in the playoffs. But he's still not a $7.75 million a year defenseman. He ain't putting up 45 points. What did Brady Skjei have at least twice as many points as Dmitry Orlov? So the Hurricanes don't do bidding wars. Even for their own players, they don't do bidding wars, which is why I said this last offseason, that knowing what was coming up, if you want to keep guys, you got to get out ahead of it. The Hurricanes need to do a better job as a front office in not waiting until it's too late. And that's what is catching them here. If they wanted to keep Brady Skjei, it was something that had to happen last offseason when you could have. Same thing with Brett Pesce. Same thing with Teuvo Teravainen. And Jake Guentzel doesn't fit with Jake Guentzel, but with a Jordan Martinook or a Teuvo Teravainen, if you wanted to keep these guys, the time to do it was last offseason. It happens with restricted free agents. There was never going to be a contract, by the way, last offseason with Seth Jarvis. Never. Because nobody knew, including Seth and his team. But if I'm the Hurricanes, I ain't waiting. Especially with Guentzel out the door. If you don't re-sign Necas for 2 years, you've got all the room in the world now to take restricted free agency away from Seth Jarvis. Do the 8-year deal now. I'm telling you, 8 times 8 gets it done with Seth Jarvis. Easy. You might even be able to just give him the Svechnikov deal. 8 times 7.75. Real quick, because I know there's a lot of sky is falling type stuff out there, and we're going to wrap on this. And I think, just to reiterate, going back to the Guentzel thing, I think Carolina's desire to win the deal. All right, he wants 8.8, but maybe we can get him for 8 times 7.5. And the longer you wait, the closer you get to July 1, which is, again, Monday at noon, is when it all opens. And you just left too many variables. If you just met the 8.8 times 8 on Monday or Tuesday, whatever it was, it gets done. We don't get Tampa involved. There have been rumors that other teams were involved, interested the entire time. Maybe he wasn't interested in the other teams. Maybe he wasn't interested in Vancouver or Nashville or Chicago or wherever. Maybe it was always Carolina and then, oh, wait, Tampa? Snazzy uniforms? No state income tax? So, you got to get your business done earlier. And eventually they'll learn. Right? They got burned by the Aho deal, by the Aho offer sheet. And I'll reiterate again why the real reason why they got burned wasn't that they paid more by about $500,000 a year, roughly, for the 5 years for Aho, when you could have gotten it for $8 million. But the real problem was that it was a 5-year deal, not an 8-year deal. And remember this, the Aho contract, the new contract kicks in this year. An 8-year deal the first time, we get 3 more years of Aho at 8. See what I'm talking about? This is why you don't mess around. And the organization needs to do a better job of figuring out ahead of time who are our guys. And once you figure that out, you don't wait. You don't. You get it done. And you get it done for as long as makes sense. Because now we're looking at a free agent market that Carolina is unlikely to participate in. And there are a lot of fans out there going, well, who are we going to get? Who are we going to get in free agency? Like, I think the answer might be nobody. I mean, certainly nobody at the top. I'd love for them to go throw $7 million a year at Elias Lindholm. I'd be all over that. But I mean, he's going to get 7.5 or 8 somewhere else. Again, Carolina does not bidding war. They don't do bidding war. So that ultimately is where we are. So I think Carolina is more than likely going to go trade route, or everybody who has been in an old-fashioned rotisserie league, not a draft. Like we do fantasy football drafts. But for those people maybe my age who were in like the original baseball rotisserie leagues, where you'd throw out names and everybody would bid on them, and those people with some discipline would kind of sit back and wait. And that maybe you don't get all the big stars, but at the end of the draft, maybe you get Bo Jackson for $1. Damn Skippy, I did. Bo Jackson for $1 in 1987, 88, one of those 2 years. That's right. Maybe you get that. So Carolina is they're just going to wait it out. I don't think they're going to dip into their jump into the pool. But I know I was wrong about him last year. I was wrong about him at the trade deadline. I hope I'm wrong again. I don't see Carolina as a major player in free agency. I think they're more likely to do the trade route, maybe find some guys who need changes of scenery. I don't think they'll go bring back Jeff Skinner, who was just bought out by the Buffalo Sabres. But I see Carolina doing I see Carolina waiting. And it's going to make some fans a little uneasy, and I'm sure it's not fun to be them either. But I hope they surprise me. I hope they surprise me, and I hope they go into, starting tomorrow, figure out some pieces that will make them better. But the longer, by the way, they don't trade Necas, the more likely it is, obviously, that they're going to sign him to the contract. I don't think we'll see arbitration there. I think they will sign him to a 2-year deal, and I don't think it'll be a cheap deal at all. I think it'll be in the neighborhood of 7. And that would be a good deal for Martin Necas, because in the right frame of mind, I think Necas could be a big player. We'll see. We're brought to you by the Aluminum Company of North Carolina. If it's for the exterior of your home, you can find it at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina on Hamlin Road in Durham. No place like it. We'll probably come on and jump on and do some Canes Corner podcast shorts, if you will, where I'll just jump on for like 6 or 7 minutes at the end of the first night, and we'll kind of figure out where we are through free agency as events warrant. Until, I appreciate all of you hanging out. It's been fun. It's been real. And it has been real fun. So we'll talk to you very soon here on the Canes Corner podcast. Good night.